Good afternoon and welcome to today's EUROMED Migration Talks. I am Marco Ricorda, your host from the International Center of Migration Policy Development. And today I have the pleasure to be accompanied by Ronnie Goldberg, Senior Counsel for the U.S. Council for International Business, Chair of the International Organization of Employers Working Group on Migration, and representing the business mechanism to the Global Forum on Migration and Development. Ronnie, thank you for being with us today.
Pleasure.
Ronnie, do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic will have an impact on migratory flows and on the international labor market? And if so, in what form and with what perspectives?
Well, certainly it will. COVID-19 is going to have an impact on virtually, I think, every aspect of our society and our governance. When those changes will take place and in what form, nobody knows right now, which is part of the difficulty that we're all facing. Certainly pre-COVID, the narrative on international migration was not necessarily positive or conducive to the goals of the Global Compact on Migration, that is, safe and orderly flows. What we've seen since the onset of the pandemic, of course, is a virtual end to migration as to all cross-border travel. We've seen, I think, some positive developments in terms of perception of migration, in that there's been, in many places, a lot of attention drawn to the importance of the healthcare and other frontline and essential workers who are migrants in various places around the world. But also an enormous rise in the volume, the nature, and the complexity of the regulatory regimes in which employers and others have to comply in order to cross borders now. If anyone would like a sense of the complexity of that change, you've only got to go to the website of, for example, the Fragaman law firm, which has a public repository of all the changes to labor migration regulations around the world. And last time I looked, it was running to upwards of 120 pages. So movement now is restricted in general. It's become immensely more complex and differentiated for people moving around the world. And if we know anything about the history of regulation, it's not going to go away easily or quickly.
Business success and competitiveness in the global economy require clear and consistent migration policies, national laws, and procedures that allow companies to attract and retain skilled workforces. Between your experience, can you explain to us what is the added value of skills mobility in the private sector?
Well, we live in a world in which skills and talent are the essential currency. The more we progress technologically, the more developments such as artificial intelligence, but not just AI, all kinds of technological advancements in virtually every field of enterprise. The more these improve our productivity, our efficiency, bring prosperity, the more dependent companies are on finding and retaining the appropriate talent, the appropriate skills. Now, we know that the world is facing, employers everywhere in the world are facing significant, even before COVID, significant skills gaps. That's partly because of demography. because there's a mismatch between the youth and employable people, largely in the developing world, and a developed world which is aging, and therefore needs to import many of the skills and much of the talent. So part of it is demography. Part of it is the failure, or at least the slowness of our education systems to catch up with the needs to match the kind of education our children are getting with the kind of skills that they're going to require to be employable. But the net effect is that the way companies can find and deploy and hopefully retain the skills they need to be competitive is by enlarging the talent pool, and that means across borders. So the ability to have a robust system of labor mobility is key to finding the right skills that competitive companies need.
Engaging with employers during the development of migration policies is of the utmost importance for governments. In light of your experience, what are the main challenges impeding fruitful collaboration between businesses and policymakers in the area of labor migration policy? Can more be done?
Well, certainly more can be done. I think one of the contextual challenges is the fact that migration policy is the victim of a highly politicized, highly sensitive debate all over the world. So the more the debate is dominated by xenophobia, by nationalism, etc., the harder it is to engage in rational, data-driven discussion. Employers, businesses are the users of, we're talking now about labor migration, labor mobility. They're the users of migration systems. They're the ones who can best tell governments what works and what doesn't, where the hangups are, what the needs are. But not every government around the world has the systems in place or mechanisms in place to regularly consult business. One of the reasons that we created the business mechanism to the GFMD, and one of the impetuses for it was the recognition by quite a number of governments that this business government channel of communication was either non-existent or not as strong as it should be. And so to their credit, they facilitated the creation of this business mechanism to bring the views of and the expertise of the private sector into migration debates. But of course, what needs to happen is that this interaction, this engagement needs to happen at the national level. And that's not a wholesale enterprise, that's a retail enterprise. It has to take place in each country around the world. So that's the challenge. The fact that the International Organization of Employers, which consists of representative employer organizations from nearly 150 countries around the world, is at the center of the business mechanism, means that we have a network that potentially reaches virtually every country. And part of our mission is to engage local employers, to empower them and to talk to their own governments, to help them with information, data, material, and so on. So to hopefully create a multiplier effect.
If we look at low-skill labor, we see that the needs often are met by by foreign workers who unfortunately lack a properly defined status. The creation of more legal avenues for low-skilled migration tends to reduce the incidence of irregular migration. Ronnie, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my thought is that precisely. Um, this is one of our fundamental points. No one doubts or disputes that irregular migration is a problem. It's a problem in terms of the narrative, right? We talked before about the narrative. It's a problem for employers who, by employing irregular migrants, are violating the law and making themselves vulnerable and putting themselves in a position that no employer should be in. But mostly, really, fundamentally, it's a problem for the irregular migrants themselves, who are vulnerable, who lack legal protections. Everything we can do to reduce the incentive for irregular migration is absolutely essential. The business mechanism and the business community more generally has been very taken up with the issue of the plight of low-skilled migrants. We've been very active working with the ILO and also in quite a number of other initiatives.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of migrant workers in key sectors of the economy has been quite relevant. Do you think that reporting on these efforts has contributed to nurture a less polarized debate on migration? What are your thoughts on this?
I wish it had. It should. I'm thinking in some despair of my own country, where rather than contributing to a more positive narrative, what COVID-19 may have done is allow or facilitate an even more strident anti-migrant set of policies sort of undercover. I think it's quite significant that the United States Chamber of Commerce, which has been a strong and vocal supporter of the current administration in many, many areas, is now suing the US government over quite draconian migration restrictions that have been put in place only recently. These virtually ended programs we have to bring highly skilled migrants to the US for reasons that I think we've talked about before, to address the skills gap and to supply needed talent. They've sought to diminish or possibly eliminate the possibility of students to be educated in the US, which is also a really important contributor to the skills profile. And it has many, many positive benefits, both for the students themselves and for the United States. So the fact that the US Chamber is moved to sue to try to beat back these policies, I think is a really important signal of the importance that the business community places on labor mobility, on the ability of persons not just to fulfill their own personal aspirations, but to contribute to their country of destination, and the importance to that country of destination for them to bring their talent, their skills, their energy, and their enterprise.
sharing compelling migration success story may help, and hopefully will help, demonstrate how migrants apply their skills to enrich, as you mentioned, the local economy and communities. So how could the private sector contribute in crafting an honest and compelling narrative on skills mobility that, let's say, may resonate with governments as well as with skeptical publics? What do you think can be the contribution of the private sector in this effort?
I think we could do a much better job. I think that there are a number of reasons that have perhaps impeded the ability of business to tell a compelling story in this regard. One is the understandable reluctance of companies to insert themselves in what is in many places a very sensitive and highly politicized debate or discussion. So their tendency is to want to not raise their profile. Although there are important exceptions to that, in which usually large companies have leapt into the migration discussions out of a combination of reasons. One is the importance of migrants to their own operations, pressure from their workforce and their employees, and even a strong moral conviction that the various policies have been wrong. But by and large, not a lot of companies have stepped forward, and not a lot have given prominence. I've seen wonderful, I'm not sure what to call them, vignettes or wonderful case studies based on the contribution of migrants to a company's bottom line and to the societies and the communities in which they live. Very positive stories. But getting these widely dispersed and promulgated, it seems to be a problem. Perhaps, and here maybe I shouldn't be quite so pessimistic as I was a moment ago. Perhaps COVID will give us some new opportunities. And one other opportunity, I think, is technology and the role of technology. Here, business is, I think, leading the way. I'm thinking about technology in two different senses. One sense is the way in which, well, look, here we are on Zoom. The way in which technology, particularly information and communication technology, has been the savior of many businesses who've been able to continue to function because of technologies like these, as well as the creator of even jobs and businesses that we didn't even think of before COVID. So that's a quite positive thing. That's going to change the landscape of employment in many places. It already is beginning to, again, in ways we're not entirely able to predict, but it will change things. But also, technology can be an enabler, a facilitator, and a great help in migration flows. There are many ways, and by the way, the business mechanism has been working to incentivize and to promulgate various technological solutions to migration issues and problems around the world. So there are many ways in which the private sector can bring its technological expertise and its products and services to those in civil society, to government, as well as to other businesses, to help in the narrative. So I think that's a promising area.
On that note, Ronnie, thank you very much for being with us today. Join us from Maine. It was a real pleasure. and we hope to collaborate with you and with the GFMD in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
To all our followers, we'll be back next week with another episode of EUROMED Migration Talks. Thanks again for being with us. See you next week.